Thank you so much for that, Elder Oasis. We are honored by your prayer and your presence today, and also the presence of Elder Judy. Thank you so much for being with us. With that, I would now like to ask Minister Ien, Canada's Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth, which I neglected to say before, to share today's announcement.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here. I'm looking at you, Laura. I'm looking at you, Joanne. I'm looking at the elders. I'm looking at all of you and thinking, we're here. This means something. Elder Wallace, thank you. Elder Judy, thank you for starting us off in a good way. It means everything that you're here. Good morning, everyone. Joanne, I have to give you the first shout out. I told Joanne earlier that I did a deep dive and did some research, and so I've seen the work. I've seen the years of work. You've been a true leader in Saskatchewan and in this country, and I want to take a moment to thank you for your advocacy and all of your work and leading with such empathy. Thank you. Minister Ross, Laura, you have a lot of responsibility. And talk about leadership. You were Saskatchewan's Minister of Parks and Culture and Sport, and Minister, of course, responsible for the status of women and Francophone affairs. But this is how we came to be. It's the status of women part. Your leadership is unequaled. Thank you for being an amazing partner, and it's an honor to stand alongside you today. When we see that 11 million people in Canada have experienced intimate partner violence at least once by the age of 15, we know that we have to take action. It's not even a question. And the first step to confront this is an honest national conversation, and I emphasize the honest part, about how gender-based violence, how intimate partner violence is talked about, and how our society sees it, where it's placed. Because this isn't just about a physical act, it's about the emotional, it's about the financial, it's about the mental toll that survivors carry for the rest of their lives. It's about the people working on the front lines to help families rebuild their lives. It's about how we bring men and boys into the conversation to break this generational cycle of violence. And I say these things, and I share these things to show that a problem as complex as gender-based violence requires a multi-pronged solution. That solution requires us to look at exactly who is being impacted, because we know that Indigenous women and girls and equity-seeking communities are disproportionately impacted. That's a fact. And when we take into account the experiences of people living in rural settings, access to transportation services, and the underreporting of these incidents, I look at the numbers and I always add so much more to them because there's a lot of underreporting. We get the numbers that we know. We don't get the numbers that we don't know. Those who are impacted and are too afraid to come forward. So many factors are at play. But knowing what the issue is one thing. Taking action, decisive action, is quite another, which is exactly why our government, working alongside provinces and territories, launched the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence last year. This historic 10-year plan shows our unwavering commitment to confront this issue while enabling federal, provincial, and territorial governments to continue working with victims and survivors, Indigenous partners, direct service providers, advocates, municipalities, so many in the private sector, and researchers to end gender-based violence in Canada. This national plan was the product of roughly 1,000 recommendations that we received from stakeholders and people working on the front lines. They know what's happening. That's where they are. with 80% of the recommendations falling under provincial jurisdiction. So coming out of this extensive consultation process, we identified 3 key priorities that the National Action Plan focuses on. Prevention, increasing it, increasing those prevention efforts, reaching underserved and at-risk populations, and stabilizing the GBV, the gender-based violence sector. And our provincial partners like Saskatchewan rolled up their sleeves. They got to work, doing some hard work with our government on exactly how we can address this issue in a fulsome way that meets the unique challenges of each and every province and territory, because they're all different. They all have different needs. And we wanted to make sure that we address that. And you've been so patient. But this brings us to today's exciting announcement. I am proud to announce a federal contribution of $20.3 million over 4 years, alongside the Government of Saskatchewan, to support the implementation of the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence. Understanding the calls for increased efforts in preventing GBV in the first place, and I spoke about this, a minimum of 25% of federal funding will be allocated towards increasing prevention efforts, 25%, the first priority of the plan. This marks one of the first in a series of bilateral agreements between the Government of Canada and the provincial and territorial governments, with Manitoba also reaching an agreement today. This funding will support the Government of Saskatchewan and its partners to enhance services and supports to victims and survivors of gender-based violence and their families, because we know the domino effect. This is never about one person. It's families, it's children, it's those who support. It impacts a lot of people. Today's historic investment builds on the work that both our governments announced earlier this year to provide critical support to crisis hotlines. I feel like I was just with you yesterday, Laura, doing that. Thank you again, Minister Ross, for being a tremendous, tremendous ally on this important cause. You don't mince words, and I love that about you. You just tell it straight, and I appreciate that. It takes people and organizations on the ground as well, though, to support people in need. Les difficultés liées à l'élimination de la violence fondée sur le sexe n'ont pas de solution facile. And the pandemic created an unprecedented challenge for those experiencing gender-based violence and the organizations that support them. But these organizations stepped to the plate in a huge way and found innovative ways to continue, even though they were in those circumstances. We were in those circumstances to support their communities. Organizations such as the Provincial Association of Transition Houses and Services of Saskatchewan, PATHS, and other organizations that are here today, truly making a difference. Thank you. Our government has supported PATHS on projects to improve the safety of women in the workplace, as well as developing and implementing community plans to prevent and address the high rates of violence against women in many communities in this province. And I highlight that work as a key piece of the types of prevention methods we can see coming out of investments from the National Action Plan, because again, we know that preventing violence from happening in the first place is key. It's a key part of the solution. All of your work, all of you here, is so crucial to so many experiencing gender-based violence. I've heard the stories across this country, which is why we've moved to action and to continue it. I've sat down, I've sat in, I've listened. You're changing lives. And it's not a stretch to say you're saving lives, because you are. To close, I've spoken far too long. We're here today because we're hopeful And we're hopeful that by combining our efforts, we can put an end, and I don't use that word end lightly, an end, because you've got to name it, and you've got to say it, you've got to be decisive about it, and work towards it, to end gender-based violence, removing this barrier to achieving true and lasting gender equality. That is the goal. That's the only goal, to end it. So by continuing to work together, we will build a safer Canada. We are. And I'm pleased that we're starting here on the prairies and in Saskatchewan. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much for those words, Minister Ien. I think you really outlined the scope of the issue and why it's so important that we're all here today. Thank you. And now I would like to invite the Honourable Minister Laura Ross, Saskatchewan's Minister responsible for the Status of Women Office and Minister of Parks, Culture and Sports, to provide her take on today's historic announcement.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Joanne, for the introduction. And the land we gather on today is Treaty 6 territory and the traditional home of the Métis. And we also acknowledge the land in an act of reconciliation to those whose territory we are on. So thank you for having me here today on behalf of Premier Scott Moe and the Government of Saskatchewan. We are so blessed and so honored to have two elders with us today, starting with the smudging ceremony. And, you know, it was wonderful to have a full explanation of what a smudging ceremony really is about, because it's about coming together, working together for common goals. So thank you so much. I'd like to offer my thanks and welcome to Honourable Marci Ien. I'll call her Marci, but can we say it's Laura and Marci, Marci and Laura? There we go. For coming today, because, you know, we value the work that you're doing, and we value that you appreciate what Saskatchewan is really doing to end gender-based violence. I'd also like to recognize MLA Marv Friesen. Marv is here today. Marv is also the Legislative Secretary to our ministry, so thank you so much, Marv, for joining us today. And I would also like to thank the WDM for hosting us today. This is a beautiful place, and I hope each and every one of you take a little bit of time and go through the building. It's amazing. This place is fun. It's educational, but it's amazing. Also take the time to visit one of our newest exhibits. It's a partnership that we have with Whitecap Dakota First Nation, and shares their history and their participation. Now, we've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and Saskatchewan endorsed the National Action Plan in November last year. Now, since then, our officials have been working closely with the federal government to develop a strategy that meets Saskatchewan's needs and perspectives. I wish to thank Bernadette Hamill, the Executive Director at Status of Women, and everyone in the ministry. You know, they all rolled up their sleeves and they did everything to make sure that this very important agreement would be able to be signed, but also to ensure that Saskatchewan's wants and needs are going to be met. So, and I believe that this agreement is one that is going to make a difference right here in our province for the people who live here. Because, you know, everyone deserves to live in a place safe, free from abuse, free from violence, free from exploitation. And Saskatchewan is proud to be one of the first provinces to announce the agreement with the federal government. Let's face it, this is a pretty special place. This year, Saskatchewan invested $27.5 million into programs and services that prevent violence and support victims and help break the cycle of violence and provide safe spaces where people can begin to heal and build a new life. And today's announcement is another step forward. This $20.3 million over the next 4 years will help us expand and enhance these services and build on the good work going on throughout the province to address interpersonal violence and abuse. Now, for Saskatchewan, prevention is key. We need to be in front of the problem, not chasing it. And that is why 70% of the funding in this agreement will go towards education, awareness, and intervention. Work that can help us stop violence before it occurs. Now, this includes expanding intervention programs, targeting human trafficking, increasing Indigenous-led approaches, and continuing to work on Face the Issue. Now, this is a campaign that has successfully raised awareness of interpersonal violence. Now, the Face the Issue campaign is provided in English, French, Cree, and Dene. We want to reach everyone in Saskatchewan. And of course, funding will also go to enhance existing support for survivors. Now, I know that our community partners are pretty pleased about this agreement, and I think what they really want to know is what's next? How's this going to roll out? Well, in this year, the majority of the funding will be directed to community organizations. Requests for proposals will be issued this fall, and frontline organizations will have an opportunity to put forward their ideas based on their insight and their expertise. And as we move through the next 4 years, we will be able to adjust and make sure that we meet the needs of the people of Saskatchewan. Now, this agreement, it is a positive step forward. An additional $20.3 million towards an issue that so many, well, everyone in this room is trying to solve. Now, we know that there is still more work to be done. The complexity, the nature of violence, it's a long road ahead for us. But this announcement gets us closer to our goal, which is to end gender-based violence. I'm going to ask each and every one of you to make sure that you never use GBV, because then it can become a serial. It can become anything. Let's call it, like you said, let's name it for what it is. So to remove this idea from society that someone can harm another person. Now, over the last few months, I've spoken with many provincial counterparts about this 10-year plan. And this is a national strategy that connects all of us. And we are much stronger together. We go from tackling complex problems on our own to a more coordinated approach. I look forward to working with the federal government, my provincial, my territorial counterparts, frontline agencies over the next 10 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Minister Ross, and for letting us know some of the direction that we will be taking here in Saskatchewan as part of this very historic action plan moving forward. And I was chatting with Minister Ien just before this event, and we were talking about how and you had mentioned here about the thousands of recommendations, and I have worked with advocates in Saskatchewan and across the country who have put forth some of those, not the full 1,000, some of those, and we know there is a lot of work that needs to be done to get to where we need to go, but we see this very much as an important start of a new journey to address the violence that really is a preventable scourge in our society. It certainly has been my privilege to be part of this event today, and it is my hope that the investments that we've heard about here today will challenge and change those attitudes that lead to gender-based violence, while also ensuring that those who are currently experiencing violence and abuse have access to the services that they need when and where they need them. Government support like this is critical, and yet to truly end gender-based violence, an all-of-society approach is needed. So everyone here needs to not only say it and name it, but make sure they're watching out for those around them and providing that support and assistance. Whether someone's experiencing violence or using it, you can still support and help in that way. Certainly my organization PATHS, our member agencies, and other partner agencies that I know are here in the audience today are eager to work with all levels of government and civil society to take action to prevent, address, and ultimately eliminate gender-based violence. And so this brings the formal part of this announcement to a close. We're going to have some of the dignitaries take photos, and then we will go to media questions. So with that, I will thank you all for joining us today.
Hello, we're now going to be taking questions from the media. Please introduce your name and outlet. There is a microphone to your right. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions du média. S'il vous plaît, veuillez introduire votre nom. Et il y a un microphone à votre droite.
Happened before. It's happened before.
This is Pratyush Dayal from CBC News, Saskatchewan. I'll be asking some questions on the behalf of our Parliamentary Bureau. So they were curious to know that as the government prepares for something of a reset with the cabinet shuffle tomorrow, where do you think
this was coming.
where do you think your party could improve on connecting with Canadians?
Thank you so much for the question. So I have to tell you, I serve a prime minister who, I say, came to get me and saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Because I came from broadcast, I came from communications. There are so many that I have the privilege to serve with who are doing just that, serving. They are connecting. That is happening. I'm on the ground. I see it. So the answer is the work is being done.
And just to follow up to that, do you expect to change your roles yourself tomorrow?
Again, I serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, and I say this because really I didn't see myself ever being in a position like this. So whatever or wherever he wants me, I will be. But what I will tell you concerning this announcement today, whoever is in this position, this work is going to continue. This is an evergreen plan. We will be continuing to consult with provinces and territories and doing the work with organizations on the ground. So this isn't going anywhere, whether or not I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say, if I had the Prime Minister's phone number, I'd give him a dingle and tell him, leave Marci where she's at, because we're doing really good work here. We get along well. So, like, leave it alone, because we're getting stuff done, if I had my chance. Just say it. Okay. Just say it.
You're hilarious. I love you so much. I love you so much.
So whoever has his number, share.
I love you much.
Bonjour, mon nom est Fatoumata Traoré pour Radio-Canada. Pouvez-vous m'expliquer ce que ça signifie pour vous, votre annonce d'aujourd'hui, cet investissement ici en Saskatchewan pour la lutte sur les agressions fondées sur le sexe? Pourquoi c'est symbolique pour vous, cette annonce en Saskatchewan?
Pour toi et le ministre.
Okay. Pour vous.
Pour vous. Oui. Okay. Merci beaucoup. I am going to answer this in English if that's okay, because j'étudie le français and I'm not great yet. So I want to make sure that I answer you correctly. And you were asking about the significance of the investment in Saskatchewan. This is what, in consultation with Laura and her amazing team in the department, this is what we came up with together. And the important part here, and I've said this before, is that what Saskatchewan needs is not necessarily what Ontario needs, is not necessarily what Alberta needs or British Columbia. So these are tailor-made because of who's at the table. And that's the way we want it to be. And so as far as the organizations that will be served, that will be under the purview of the minister moving forward, consulting with organizations on the ground and all of you that are doing amazing work. And it's important to say that this is evergreen because things can change. Circumstances can change. And that's why I outlined the 3 pillars, prevention being one of them, underserved communities, and making sure that the gender-based violence sector is supported, falls into this plan. You will see, and these announcements with Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and then the days to come, more announcements. And you will see, I don't want to say tailor-made, but yes, because the provinces and the organizations know what they need, and that's what we wanted to do. The federal government could not have just come up with a plan and said, provinces and territories, this is what you're going to do. It is coming to the table together, and that's what the money represents, and that's what you'll see in the coming days, the organizations and those on the ground doing the real work, getting what they need to continue it.
Thank you so much. Et est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral a un plan d'action pour les femmes autochtones tuées et disparues? Est-ce qu'il y a un programme, un plan d'action en place du gouvernement fédéral? Do you want me to repeat?
Yes, please.
In English? Oh gosh, my English is
That's
worse
okay.
than
No, it's not. I'm sure it's not.
Okay.
You go ahead.
Does the federal government has a plan for the indigenous woman
Yes.
who's murdered and
Missing and murdered.
Missing, yeah.
Yes, and thank you for that question because it all intersects. All of it intersects. And that's why you see the second tenet there. And the minister knows when we meet and we have our federal, provincial, territorial meetings in a week. How about that?
So you're going to be there.
Well, someone will be. That's happening. It's important that it's Indigenous leaders that we start those meetings with. And this isn't about, and it's important to have cultural representation. I can't tell you how many friendship centers, I was at Comfy yesterday, here in Saskatoon, and meeting, with Shirley and her team. It's important that people see themselves when they're seeking help and know that they can go into a place that sees them and understands culture. There's so much work being done. Think about the red dress alert and the $2.5 million there. And it continues across government. That's really important. I think sometimes people see ministries as siloed and everybody working in silos, but the minister knows that's not the way, that's not how you get the work done. You work together. And so this isn't just the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth centering Indigenous women. This is all of government. This is cabinet colleagues, this is provinces, this is territories. So hope that answers your question. I've been too long-winded, haven't I?
It was perfect.
Did you? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
I think I'd like to also add, when we did our campaign on Face the Issue, and we've done 2 tranches, and we have a third one coming out this fall, we did ensure that it was translated into English, French, and Cree and Dene, so that we could make sure that we covered off as major portion of our population to be able to understand, and really that we were able to convey the message within the different communities.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. And on that point, because you made me think of something else, Laura/Minister Ross, the crisis lines.
Yes.
And you talked about languages and who's on the other end when people call in 24/7, 365 days, Dene and the other languages, so that you feel comfortable to call in and talk to somebody that speaks the language you do and how important that is.
John Flatter, CTV Saskatoon. Just a question for the federal minister. Have you had a conversation with the Prime Minister yet, and are you planning to be in Ottawa tomorrow? Just direct.
I so appreciate you as a former reporter. I love the questions so much because you're so going there. You're so going there. Again, I will tell you, whatever calls come or don't come, I serve at the pleasure of this Prime Minister, and I've shared with you a personal story, and I will say, former journalist to journalist, I was minding my business and, literally doing a talk show, and a call came in. And I in no way, if anybody had asked me a couple of years ago or told me this is where I'd be, I'd say absolutely not. I'll be producing a documentary or hosting something or doing something. Did not see myself here. And I say that because I wholeheartedly will serve in any capacity. And I'm saying that to you. So we'll all have to wait and see. We know what tomorrow is. But wherever the Prime Minister wants me, or Wednesday, rather. Wednesday, I don't even know what day it is. I won't even tell you that I just got back from Kigali. We won't go there. But wherever he wants me to be, I will be.
Hi, I'm Helena. I'm speaking on behalf of CKOM News, and I'm just wondering, I know you won't have a concrete answer for this because you're going to be meeting with organizations, but I'm just wondering, in your guys' opinion, how specifically you think this is a preventative measure? Is this something that's going to be talked about in schools? How is this going to be an educative experience for people in Saskatchewan?
Well, thank you very much for the question. You know, this is a really good opportunity this fall for the different organizations to be able to submit their plans of how they would like to see this program come forward. And we really appreciate the leadership that Joanne has shown with making sure that concerns and issues were being brought forward from Saskatchewan. But like I say, we will be going out this fall. People will be, the different organizations, community organizations, will be able to submit what they believe would be a really good program. Then we would be able to select from those, and we'll be able to move forward on that. So it's a real collaborative approach in that respect. And like I said, I really appreciate all the work that Joanne and her team has done to ensure that Saskatchewan's voice is being heard. I also want to commend the individuals at the Status of Women here, the whole team within the ministry has worked really hard to ensure that when we were crafting what Saskatchewan's contribution would be, what Saskatchewan's wants and needs are going to be, that they were being heard, that the autonomy of the provinces and territories were being respected. And that's where we have such a good working relationship, which is why I really want Marci to stay where she is, because we have really developed really good, open, and respectful dialogue, respectful for our, like I said, our territories, our province, our federal, that we understand that we all have certain roles. And when we come to the table, we really just want the best. What do we want? We want to end gender-based violence. How's your time?
We're now going to take questions from the line, starting with Fraser Needman.
Good morning. Fraser Needman from International News. I got a question for Minister Ien, and that's on how this National Action Plan aligns with the calls to justice of the MIWG board.
Fraser, thanks so much for the question. And as I mentioned before, they are intersectional. And when you look at the tenets that we have spelled out here, the first being prevention, the second being underserved communities and the work that we do there, and the third being supporting the gender-based violence sector, Indigenous women, 2SL communities are at the center of that. And so the two, it is very much a collaboration, and it is across governments, collaboration, and so they go hand in hand. These aren't siloed things. These are working together to do this.
And just maybe as a follow-up, you mentioned the Red Dust Alert.
Yes.
I know money's set aside for it in the budget, but has there been any progress on actually setting that up?
The $2.5 million is what you are referring to, and yes, work is being done. I know my cabinet colleagues, as well as others, because as you know, Fraser, this is an issue that goes across the aisles. This isn't about, where you sit on the political realm. This is about prevention and helping those who need it. So we are working in a collaborative way to move this forward.
Thanks.
Thank you, and that's all the time we have for today. That concludes the press conference. Thank you for your time and attendance. Merci beaucoup, c'est tout le temps qu'on a pour aujourd'hui. Merci pour votre présence.